Good morning. My name is Brandon, and I'm an alcoholic and addict in recovery. And yesterday we started talking about phases 1 and 2 of the relapse process as laid out by Gorski and Miller in Staying Sober. And today we're going to go on to phase 3 and 4. So let's hear what they have to say. Phase 3 of the process involves avoidance and defensiveness. During this phase, I try to avoid anyone or anything that will force me to be honest about how my thinking, feelings, and behavior have changed. Now, if you have been in recovery and have friends in recovery, you might have seen this before. This sounds to me a lot like when a friend in recovery all of a sudden stops being as active in your group as they once were. And I've had this happen a few times where it seemed like the friend was getting some advice from people in the group on maybe you should consider doing something differently. People in the group were starting to notice that something wasn't quite right. And instead of listening openly to that and engaging, our friend just started to back away and started to leave the group because they just wanted to avoid hearing about what was clear to everybody else as a problem in their recovery. So some other signs in phase 3 are the belief that I'll never use alcohol or drugs. So I convince myself that I don't need to put a lot of energy into my program today because I will probably never go back to drug or alcohol use. I think we've all probably known people like that who genuinely believe that they will never ever go back to using alcohol and drugs and then use that as a reason to, it's one thing to believe that, but then to use that as a reason to back off of your program. That's a bad sign that you've entered this phase. When you start to back off of the program, that no matter where you are in your recovery, that increases the likelihood that you are headed back toward relapse. So you got to keep your program strong so that you can avoid heading back to relapse and to drug and alcohol use. Worrying about others instead of self. So I take the focus off my recovery by becoming more concerned about the sobriety of others than about my personal recovery. I privately judge the drinking or using of my friends and spouse and the recovery programs of other recovering people. I have certainly in early recovery, I felt a lot of this judgment of other people and analyzing other people's recovery programs and seeing fault in what they are doing. And what I've learned is that recovery is different for everybody. There are a lot of different paths to recovery, and it's important to respect those paths. And instead of judging people, to be open and curious about what they're doing, because a lot of people who travel a different path than you have something that they can offer you. So very important not to get into this mindset, especially because this mindset can also contribute to going back toward relapse and is actually a part of this phase 3. Then there's defensiveness. I feel reluctant to discuss personal problems and what I am doing in my recovery because I am afraid I will be criticized or confronted. I feel scared, angry, and defensive when other people ask me questions about my recovery program or point out things about my recovery I want to see. I tend to get defensive even when no defense is necessary. So at the rehabilitation center that I went to, we did an exercise called Johari's Window. And it's a great exercise where you sit in a circle and then you put one person in the middle of the circle. And everybody goes around and tells that person one thing that they feel like they're doing well in their recovery and one thing that they feel like they could improve on. And the person in the middle is not allowed to get defensive. They have to listen. Their appropriate response is just to thank the people for giving them that feedback. And the reason that's such an important exercise, well, one of many reasons it's so important, is that it teaches you not to be defensive. It helps you learn how to take criticism without getting defensive about it and listen to it. And then you're supposed to leave for 24 hours before responding. Let it sit with you. Don't feel like you have to pass judgment on it immediately. And that helps train against this kind of defensiveness and allows us to learn how to listen to other people, because a lot of times our friends and our family in recovery, they see things we might not, and so we need to learn to listen to them so that we can get the best that they have to offer us in recovery as well. And there some more traits of this particular phase are compulsive behavior. So I start using compulsive behaviors to keep my mind off how uncomfortable I am feeling. Impulsive behavior, I start creating problems for myself by using poor judgment and impulsively doing things without thinking them through. And then tendencies toward loneliness. I start feeling uncomfortable around others and start spending more time alone. And what you can see through all these different traits of phase 3 is that there's a tendency back toward the type of thinking and behavior that was very characteristic of time in our addiction. As you move into phase 4, that intensifies. So for phase 4, during this phase, I start having problems in sobriety that I don't understand. Even though I want to solve these problems and work hard at it, 2 new problems pop up to replace every problem that I solve. So this reminds me of a time recently when everything seemed to be going wrong in life, and I couldn't figure out why. And I found myself genuinely stupefied by, why is all this crap happening right now? And why is it happening the way it's happening? Why am I having these problems in my life? And I'm fortunate that I recognized that if life seemed to have a series of unsolvable problems, more than likely the problem wasn't life, but was me. And so I needed to look at myself and try to figure out what's going on that is really the common thread in all these problems is me. What's going on that I need to address? But when you're in this phase 4, it's very hard to do that, because here are the traits that you have. You have tunnel vision. I start to think my life is made up of separate and unrelated parts. I focus on one small part of my life and block out everything else. Sometimes I focus only on the good things and block out or ignore the bad. At other times, I see only what is going wrong and blow that out of proportion. I can't see the big picture or figure out how what I do in one part of my life can cause problems in other parts. This goes into minor depression. I start to feel depressed, down, blue, listless, and empty of feelings. I lack energy, tend to sleep too much, rarely feel good or full of life. It's really important for us as recovering addicts and alcoholics, to understand these symptoms of depression, because when you start to feel this, it's a good indication you need to do something about it. And it's easy to miss these symptoms of depression and only pick up on depression when it really gets problematic. Another trait of this phase is loss of constructive planning. I begin to think that the slogan "one day at a time" means that I should not plan ahead or think about what I'm going to do. My plans are based more on wishful thinking, how I wish things would be, than reality, how things actually are. As a result of that thinking, my plans begin to fail, and each failure causes new problems. I start having the same kind of problems with work, friends, family, and money that I used to have when I was using addictively. And once you start having problems like that, and it feels like you're having the same problems that you had when you were using addictively, it's not a far leap in your brain and in your brain's chemistry to go, well, maybe we should just go back to using. Maybe that if the world is going to be the same as it was when we were using, maybe we should just be doing that. So that's just phase 4. There are 10 phases. We'll keep going through the phases over the next few days, map out what's going on, and hopefully you can see some things here that maybe you've experienced or know someone who has experienced that can help you arrest this relapse process prior to it beginning, or before it gets too far. So, in the meantime, hope you have a good day, and I will see you back here tomorrow.